Welcome back to the Equilibrium Report, where we slow things down and look past the outrage to figure out what's actually real. Today's topic is music streaming, and more specifically, the growing belief that making music should automatically translate into wealth, or even a way of living, for that matter. Because lately, a lot of artists sound less exploited and more confused about how economics has ever worked. There's a familiar complaint you hear over and over now. Streaming doesn't pay. Spotify's robbing artists. Millions of streams and I still can't survive. And on the surface that sounds outrageous until you stop and ask a very simple question. When exactly was music ever a guaranteed path to financial security? Or any creative hobby or endeavor for that matter? Why should you be guaranteed a living over something fun, a hobby you like to do, versus the person that has to go work a job? Because for most of history, it hasn't been like this. The vast majority of musicians never made a living from their music alone. They played shows, worked jobs, sold merch, taught lessons, licensed tracks, or just struggled. That wasn't a failure of the system, that was the system. Streaming didn't break that reality, it just removed the illusion. And what brought this up was a recent example that lit people up that I saw on Instagram from Benn Jordon, who shared that he made around $22,000 from roughly 6.5 million Spotify streams in a year. To a lot of artists, that sounded criminal. To others, it sounded depressing. To some, it sounded like proof the industry is evil. But let's pause and be honest for a second. That 22,000 came from passive listening, from one platform, from one income source, out of probably the dozen this guy has going on, because he's all over the place now. I don't really know who he is. I've seen him on YouTube before, but it seems like he just talks about whatever he can talk about to make content. He's past doing music. This is probably music that he made like 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? And maybe recent stuff. But this guy, he's all over the place now and just trying to make content. So also keep that in mind, because we'll get into that at the end. So that 22,000 came from passive listening from one platform. No touring, no physical production, no shipping, no inventory, no gatekeeping, no upfront costs, other than your distribution cost, which is like $15 a year, $20 a year or something, Historically, radio paid nothing. It's all about exposure. CD sales barely paid after recoupment. Piracy paid literally zero. So the question isn't, why is this so low? The real question is, why did anyone expect it to be high? Here's the uncomfortable truth most artists avoid. Streaming is not a salary system. It's a discovery system. Especially nowadays, you basically have to create content to get exposure that's not even related to your actual music or craft that you're trying to do. You have to do other crap and make this content. And everyone wants the content to be perfect, and everything, everyone wants it a certain way, and it's weird. But anyway, streaming is closer to radio than a job. It's exposure with receipts. If someone listens to your song once while doing dishes, the value of that moment is tiny. And this is where people get caught up and confused and out of perspective. They think that one listen should equal dollars, a dollar or something, which is crazy. Which is crazy when you think about it, and we'll get into it. So if someone listens to your song once while doing dishes or vacuuming or taking a crap or whatever people are doing while they're listening to music, the value of that moment is tiny. Multiply that moment millions of times, and yes, it adds up. but the money reflects behavior, not artistic merit. Okay? Streaming platforms don't measure how meaningful your art is. They measure how often people press play and how quickly they skip. That feels cold, but markets always are. Also, it's kind of crazy to expect and assume that the value of your music that you're making in your bedroom by yourself is valued the same as a full-scale production done in a professional studio by numerous industry professionals and whatnot, and then pushed and promoted and has like a bunch of people working on the project. You know, that's just unrealistic. And this is where things get touchy. A lot of artists have started confusing creative passion with economic entitlement. They say things like, my art is worth more than this. I deserve more for what I put into it. Millions of streams should mean I'm set. Blah, 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 blah. But the market doesn't price that effort. It prices demand. And demand doesn't care how sincere you are, how long you've been grinding, or how much your music means to you. That's not cruelty. That's reality. Most music today is competing against infinite other music sources. And now you have to compete with AI. Now, if you're any good at the crafts that you're doing, you wouldn't feel threatened or really care that much about AI. But that's another story. The only people I see crying about that are people that already kind of suck. or they're trying to like make their living off just doing their hobby for fun, and they want to have a good living off of that. Well, that's a nice fantasy, but that's not reality. It works for a few people, but you have to do the whole thing to make that work. You know, you can't just, oh, I made an album and uploaded it, I should make a living. You have to do all the things that go into it. Sell merch, do other things, go on a tour, and all this crap, dude. Like, make content. You have to do everything. And I don't even want to do that. So, hats off to the people that do. So, yeah. Most music today is competing with a lot. It's instantly accessible, endlessly replaceable. Scarcity is gone. And when scarcity disappears, so does guaranteed value. People are trying to value their music like it was 1990 and before. You know, where it was just a handful of like people were able to make music, period, and get it out there. But now anyone can make it and get it out there. Pretty professionally too, you know? Like, so that alone diluted the value a ton, okay? So, I mean, this doesn't mean the industry is clean or not taking advantage of people, but the real exploitation has always lived elsewhere. Opaque label contracts, master ownership, recoupment traps, publishing theft, pay-to-play marketing dressed up as opportunity, blah, 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 blah. Artists yelling at streaming platforms while ignoring the label economics are aiming their anger at the most visible part of the machine, not the part doing the deepest damage. And also, without the streaming platforms, though, that is what you have to do to get heard or seen in music. You'd have to deal with all that stuff. You'd have to get a record label. You'd have to get all these things, you know. No. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are like being ungrateful and entitled. You know, it's like, oh, I only made over $20,000 off one streaming platform when there's like 5 other main ones that I'm on. And I'm making content and selling merch and physical albums. Like how much money do you need to make off of fucking making music, bro? Like, how much do you need, bro? You need 6 figures? For what? I've been living a comfortable life on well less than that. Like, and I've been screwed a lot, so I definitely would have been doing a lot better had I not kept getting screwed. But that's a whole nother deal. And I'm still not crying about it. Like, I'm still grateful for where I'm at and what I get to, you know, have in life, and, you know, still doing better than a lot of people. So I'm going to be grateful, you know. If I was making $1,000 a year off of my music, I'd feel like pretty cool. Like, oh, shoot, I can invest that back into the music and do more stuff if I want to make money off of it. You know what I mean? I can buy some equipment, or I can do this or that, blah, blah, blah. But, and as someone that does make music, my music's only just recently gotten good enough to where I even like it or consider it listenable. And nobody listens to it, and I managed to somehow make money. Like, yeah, it was like $5 over the few years I've been, like, a couple years I've been trying to do this. But literally no one listens to my music, and I still made money, is the point. So I don't know what people are crying about, you know? Like, how do you cry about making a 20K off of one platform? Like, that's almost enough to have a living. I mean, I guess people want to live way above their means or something. And everyone wants to be like a baller, I guess. And everyone wants to be rich and have money to exploit other people or something. I don't know what everyone's deal is, but most people only even care about money because they want to exploit their sexual freaking desires. That's like most people's motivation for obtaining money in life. And so that they can have some sex that they want. That's the sad reality of it. So it's that, and then the rest of the stuff. Like, most people wouldn't even be in relationships or marriages if they weren't able to have sex. You know, kind of getting off topic there. But, you know, people are just greedy is what I'm saying. Like, no one's ever satisfied, it seems like. Everyone always has crazy expectations for things. What actually works? Artists who survive today usually understand one thing. Streaming is a tool, not the destination. It feeds tours, merch, licensing, direct fan support, content, etc. community. The artists struggling the most are often the ones trying to turn passive listeners into a living wage, which the example given of Benn Jordon, he basically can. So they want to earn a living wage without ever converting them into actual supporters. That's not a platform problem, that's a strategy problem. And like, what do they expect? You know, like, if people physically buy your album, that's a one and done thing. They'll buy it and then that's done forever. They have nothing else that brings them back or checking in to hear new stuff, like the streaming platforms would introduce new songs to them. Otherwise, they have to go and look for it, you know. And not everyone's like some fanatic. Like this whole thing where everyone has to be, oh, I need to like and I want to subscribe to everything these people do and be fed their content automatically. Like, that's a weird way to want to live, bro. Like, I hope society gets past all this shit and goes back to the way it was before social media. Honestly, like, this shit's made people weird. So, another thing almost never discussed, honestly, in these debates that I want to bring up is physical media. The comparison between what it would be without streaming platforms, and people, you know, keep saying, oh, we need to go back to physical media, you know. So this is what those people probably don't consider. Artists love to romanticize the era of CDs and vinyl, but they forget a brutal detail. Ownership kills per listen value. If someone bought a CD for $10, and let's say there's 10 songs on it, which there usually is, or more, what did they actually pay for? They paid one time. And then they could listen to those 10 or 12 songs forever, on repeat, on loop forever. And also, remember, people were selling their albums, like their used CDs and albums, and then people rebuy them? The artists don't get a cut of those resells and rebuys. No one ever complained about that. No one ever thinks about that, because most people can't think past or see past the first step. They can't comprehend anything else past the first step. Always, with any topic, anything. And that's why we're all in all the messes that we get into. You know what I mean? But anyway, if someone, you know, buys your physical media, that's a one-time deal, forever. Which, I mean, yeah, like, how many streams would they have to do to equal that $10? You know, it'd be a lot, I guess. But They could listen to those songs, 100 listens, 1,000 listens, 10,000 listens, and then hand off the album to someone else for free or for a couple dollars. They just give it to somebody. You know, and technically you can still rip the songs off of those devices and pirate them that way. Technically, so people would cry about piracy. They're just crying about everything. It seems like. So yeah, they buy the album, listen as many times as they want, give it away if they want. No additional payments, no meter running, no counts, no streams. So yeah, you buy an album once. How many times do you think you'll listen to that album in your lifetime versus how many times you'd hear those songs streaming? I don't know. But for me personally, in the amount of time I've been using Pandora alone, I'll probably stream the same songs hundreds of times, if not thousands of times over the past 20 years, almost 15 years or so, I've been using it. Versus CDs, I probably listen to a few times each, maybe, like physically, in my car or something back in the day. But I don't know. Other than that, I don't do it, I guess. But anyway, they buy it one time, no additional payment, no meter running, no stream count being ran up, no plays being ran up, no royalty clock ticking. So the uncomfortable question is this: what was each listen actually worth on physical media? I guess that depends on how many times you listen and then what you do with the physical media, right? If someone bought a $10 CD and listened to it 500 times, each listen was worth about 2 cents. And that'd be for the whole album, I think. If they listen 5,000 times, it drops to 0.2 of a cent. So that's not a streaming problem, that's how ownership works. That's why all the streaming and subscription platforms are becoming a thing, because they don't want people to own anything. So if you're an artist wanting to make a living on music, you're probably going to have a hard time doing it with physical media alone, because you're going to constantly have to sell this stuff to people. And even big time artists have this problem with a big loyal fan base, because they'll be trying to pump out a CD every fucking few months, dude, and then trying to tell people to go buy it. It's like, bro, I just bought your CD, and then people get fatigued out with that, especially if the quality kind of doesn't. I don't know, man. I feel like people pump out too much stuff. Quality over quantity. So yeah. Streaming didn't invent cheap listens. It exposed them. When people say Spotify only pays fractions of a cent per play, they're comparing it to a fantasy version of the past that never existed. Kind of like the MAGA people. Physical media felt valuable because the transaction was upfront. But once the CD left the store, the meter stopped forever. Streaming flipped that model. Instead of one purchase funding unlimited consumption, it turned listening into a measured activity. Every play is counted, every skip is logged, every repeat is tracked. That visibility feels insulting, but it's honest. Streaming didn't devalue music, it priced listening. Now, like I said, you got to keep in mind, they purchased the physical media one time, and then that's it, and then they can pass it off. Because remember, there were whole stores that were dedicated to selling used albums. And people would trade them in. Like, the artist doesn't receive any kickback off of that. So if I were going to cry about it, I'd cry about that. Why artists remember CDs and physical media wrong. Another myth artists cling to is that CD sales meant consistent income. They didn't. Most artists never recouped advances, never saw back-end royalties, never controlled distribution, never benefited from resale. The $10 CD was mostly a win for retailers, labels, and distributors. Artists got a slice only after the debt. Streaming, for all its flaws, removed manufacturing costs. returns, breakage, shipping, and middlemen. The payout is smaller per interaction, but the barrier to entry is almost non-existent. Again, not utopia, but not the theft it's portrayed as either. Here's the part no one wants to say out loud. A single listen has never been worth much. Not on vinyl, not on cassette, not on CD, not on radio, not on streaming. What made artists money historically wasn't listens, it was conversion. Listeners into fans, fans into buyers, buyers into supporters. Streaming just stripped away the illusion that listening itself was ever the valuable part. If someone streams your song once, casually, while doing something else, that interaction is worth very little. If someone buys your CD once and never listens again, that interaction was still only worth $10. The difference is emotional, not economic. Streaming feels insulting because it keeps reminding artists what a single moment of attention is actually worth in a world drowning in content. One last thing that needs to be said, because it poisons this entire conversation. The current social media environment is not built for truth. It's built for rage interaction. Outrage travels faster than nuance. Victim narratives outperform boring math. And nothing builds a platform quicker than telling people they're being robbed. So what happens? Artists see clipped screenshots, half-context numbers, and exaggerated horror stories designed to provoke anger, not understanding. Content creators lean into it because rage fuels engagement. Engagement fuels reach. Reach fuels monetization. And suddenly, the conversation about streaming isn't about economics anymore. It's about identity and grievance. The algorithm doesn't care if the information is accurate. It cares if it makes people react. So misinformation spreads, expectations get warped, and people start building entire platforms on narratives that collapse the moment you do real math. That doesn't mean artists are lying. It means the environment rewards emotional distortion over boring reality. And once outrage becomes the brand, clarity becomes the enemy. So streaming didn't kill music careers. It exposed how rare sustainable ones always were. Art is valuable, but value doesn't automatically translate into income. And mistaking one for the other leads to resentment instead of clarity. No villains, no saviors, just math, incentives, and expectations colliding with reality. This is the Equilibrium Report. We're not here to romanticize the past or demonize the present. We're here to restore balance.